Hello and welcome to the Mighty Oaks Show. Glad to have you with us today. My name is Jeremy Stolniker and I'm the Executive Director of the Mighty Oaks Foundation, and excited to spend this time with you today. Hopefully you had a great Thanksgiving and we're coming off of that holiday, getting back into the swing of things until we hit Christmas. So it's a crazy time of year, of course, but glad to have the show and glad to have you watching. If you're watching on YouTube and you have not yet subscribed, please do that. Hit the subscription area there, and also next to that there's the notification bell. That's so important. That lets you know when more content comes online. And if you follow us, maybe you're new to the channel and the show, and you haven't seen what we put on there. We have our show that comes up every Friday at 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. But throughout the week, we're posting new content, and all of that content is there for you, and it's there for you to use and hopefully to be a help to you. And I hope that you'll follow along. If you're listening somewhere else, and we've got a lot of folks who listen to the podcast or listen on the Mojo 50 radio show, please take some time to go over to YouTube, check out what we have there, and we would love to share that with you. Excited about our guest today. Michael Bluemling Jr. is with us, and all the way from Florida. We were just talking a minute ago. It is downpouring in Southern California right now. In Florida, where it rains pretty much every day, it's not raining at all. So it's sunny somewhere, which I'm happy about. Michael is an author, speaker, has his own podcast, also a radio show, and in addition to all of those things, a former candidate for Florida's District 21 for Congress, and we'll talk about that as well. So that's one side. On the other side, served in the United States Army, something we typically hold against our guests, but we won't today. There are other services. I've learned this recently. It's not just about the Marine Corps, although it feels like it should be. It's not always just about the Marine Corps, but served in Kosovo and a number of other places, transitioned out of the military, and has been an advocate for veterans causes, served with the VA, and a lot of other stuff, a life of experience. And Michael, really thankful that you come on and spend some time with us, and I'm looking forward to jumping into your story. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeremy, for having me on the show. I'm really excited about being on. Also, the work that Chad's doing, and with the Mighty Oaks Foundation. We need vetted companies out here and organizations that are helping veterans. It's one of the things I did when I was in Virginia, working for the governor, running the Virginia Values Veterans Program. We vetted companies to ensure that they were veteran friendly, and that's a big thing. And I know that your organization is doing great things. So I'm very excited about the audience, being able to talk about the struggles we have, the transition, and also best practices that we can use to be better leaders, better community leaders, and better help this country move forward. Because without our freedom, what are we? Yeah, no, absolutely.
Start, if you would, just give us your background, where you grew up, and how you ended up in the Army, and then beyond that. But what was that process like? I'm always intrigued. I think people who have not served in the military think that everyone who serves in the military is there because they didn't have anything else to do, right? And I've heard that a bunch of times, which is ridiculous. I think with as many people as there are serving, there are stories. Tell us your story, how you ended up in the military, where you served, what you did while you were there, and then your decision to transition into kind of civilian life and service after the military.
Absolutely. Actually, I was born in Fort Benning, Georgia. My whole family served. I was an Army brat, and my dad got out of the military when I was about 5 or 6, but he served in Vietnam on the USS Kitty Hawk. He was in the Navy, and then he transitioned into the Army, which is not as common today, but it does happen. But, back then, a lot more people did that. My grandfather was in Korea. My aunt served. My sister's still serving in the reserve. She served in Iraq. So just growing up in a military family, you learn those core values. But, my dad I had a very tragic childhood, actually. My father turned to drugs and alcohol. He just liked to party, maybe something he was exposed to as a kid. You just never know what makes people go through that process. And it's not a good quality of life. So I grew up in a very tragic environment, but also, I was very proud of my dad. He still served in the military, even though, he abused my mom and myself. And, a lot of just crazy things happened in my life. I was reported dead when I was 5 the first time, and then the system kept going back. So I grew up in a lot of group homes and foster homes. But I remember looking at, through his book in the USS Kitty Hawk, and just seeing all those, Navy sailors. And I was just like, wow, these people are heroes. As a kid, when you grew up in a military house, folding your corners on your bed and, everything dress right dress and making sure everything's lined up. It does teach you something about life. And, growing up in that environment, even though my dad was very, very strict, it taught me a valuable lesson. And actually, I never thought about being in the military. I love athletics. I'm very athletic. I was involved in sports and just, always try to better myself. And telling myself, I never want to have this for myself in my life, what I experienced. So graduated high school, and just, I was trying to go to college, and, I didn't really have a big support channel, it was just me. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to join the Army. And I joined the Army, and it was, I want to use it as a stepping stone. And, going into the Army, obviously that's, a big thing. Anybody who serves their country and raises their right hand is, it's an honor and a privilege to do that, to preserve the Constitution and defend the United States of America. I mean, it's an honor. I mean, I think everyone who serves is an absolute hero. So I went in to serve, and, I went in infantry. They told me there's computers on the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. So I got a little bonus, but they told me I'm going to be working around computers. I wanted to try to learn a skill that I could, use in the civilian workplace when I got out. But that's kind of funny though, right?
Yeah, the old
my MEPS officer.
You'll learn all kind of stuff. You'll learn how to
my MEPS officer, they did a good job selling, man.
Yeah, you learn how to clean. You learn how to do a lot of stuff that you didn't want to do in your home. So yeah, that's good.
Exactly. No, they got me. But you know what? Being in the infantry, it's a godsend, man. I served in the 1st Infantry Division. I made sergeant in 2.5 years offline from E1 to E5. I mean, I was fast tracking, highly decorated. I was in a Kosovo conflict in 2000. I was pre and post 9/11, part of the global war on terrorism, spent 3.5 years overseas. Got an Army Commendation Medal when I left the military, which I'm really proud of. And, I have tons of awards. And I mean, I'm highly decorated. I just love our service to our nation. I mean, those are probably some of the things that, I'll take with me for the rest of my life, more than anything else, besides having children. I mean, obviously that's a great thing. But so when I transitioned out of the military, I was Sergeant Bluemling, so it's high speed, low drag, you know what I mean? Right. I was pretty confident young man, but, coming back to America after not being in the States for 3.5 years, it's a totally different environment. So I had a floppy disk. This was, I transitioned December 31, 01. So I had a floppy disk in my hand. It tells you how long ago it's been since I served. And, but, I'm still youthful, still doing Spartan races and trying to stay active. Trying to stay fit, doing yoga, stuff like that. But, it is a grind on your body. A lot of people come back and it's a whole different world. And so I just try to be a great role model and leader for the community and other veterans, because not everybody has the same circumstance to go home to. Not everybody has the same, ability to cope with adversity or what they've seen downrange or injuries they went through. So, my whole focus is, military wise, is trying to be a great advocate for our veterans and to support them 100%, because if we don't do that, we're failing as a nation.
We work with veterans, active duty service members, the first responder community, a lot of folks who are involved in protecting our country, protecting our communities, and we're very thankful for that. We are very focused on combat trauma or trauma related to service, and that's an issue we're involved in every day, and we're thankful for the opportunity to do that. It's interesting though, and I'd value your thoughts on this, because we see a lot of folks who would come to our program and they would say, I'm struggling with drugs or alcohol or relationship issues or whatever, because of my combat service, because of my trauma related to combat. I've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, or maybe I haven't been diagnosed, but I have a lot of the symptoms, whatever the case. And really, when you start to dig underneath a lot of that, what you find is combat was present, and combat maybe drudged up some of the stuff that was underneath the surface. But a lot of folks who are struggling in those areas have a similar background to yours, came from a home that may be classified as dysfunctional or abusive. And so really what the military does is it kind of brings those things to the surface, but in a safe environment almost, right? You're in a structured environment, so it's okay. But then you transition out, and now you find yourself dealing with your past, dealing with your service, and then kind of on your own. Does that define your experience, or is that something, again, you work with the VA, something that you've seen and helped people process through?
Really, the number one thing is mentorship. I mean, when people go through a transition, the reason why I am here today and have been successful is because of, I view it as angels have come into my life. I feel like there's always people there in the military community that support you. I mean, every step of the way I've had a military person, bring me up. And I think that's what we need more of in the community. That's the biggest thing. But yeah, I'm absolutely on my own. I mean, everything I've been doing in my entire life, I've been grinding. and trying to make a better future for, my children, future generations. There's a lot of issues in the community that we have to address as veterans, as people who are advocates, who are social and community leaders. And the best way to do that is through mentorship. And, my philosophy is more of a higher level. I seek to, I want to impact millions of veterans, so I set out on a mission to, yes, I want to be, I'll give you an example. We just had a veteran we took away 1,500 pounds of trash from his mobile home.
Wow.
His neighbors are there around him. Nobody's doing anything to help him. A community leader contacted me. So a whole bunch of veterans and went over there, took it, it's just unbelievable the way this guy was living. And we cleaned his house out. And then, but he was terminally ill though. And a week later he died. This was just recently, like a week or two ago. And I actually have it on my podcast, Live with Michael Bluemling Jr., episode 12. And, it's just a tragic thing, to know that people are living like this every single day. You got neighbors around who know he's a veteran. Nobody's, reaching out to help this guy. But at least we did something to help him in that moment. But really capturing that story and carrying it on, that's what I try to do. I try to take the element of the overall big picture issues, whether it's VA reform, veterans' rights, ensuring that, people are getting the services and that they need, because a lot of times veterans get misinformation. Yeah. And that's why I wrote my book, Bridging the Gap from Soldier to Civilian, a Roadmap to Success for Veterans, because I want to, for example, it took me 9 years from the time I got out of the military to go back to school to use my GI Bill and my post 9/11 to get my 4 degrees and advanced certifications. But only because a veteran believed in me and said, hey, you need to go back to school. You need to use your GI Bill. Former military Army friend of mine, Alan Allison, who's really a mentor, if without him, I wouldn't have my education and I wouldn't have wrote the books. I would, there's so many things that happen, but that's the company I started was called Power of One. And that is one person could change someone's life. And that's what I want to do with the book is I want to give people information before they leave the military to get their documents together, get their medical records together, get things lined up with their home of record and wherever they're going to transition back to. So that when they do come back home, they got the boots on the ground already and they're running versus coming back home and they're like, they got your family, you may have gone through a divorce in the military, different things going on, and you're trying to get a new job. And then all of a sudden it's a crisis. And we don't want our military community and family to go through that.
So a couple questions you said a lot there and there's a lot to unpack, but two things. One is, what are some of the decisions that you made post-military that allowed you to be where you are today? Obviously, you've been successful in a lot of different areas. You're doing things that are important. What are some of the decisions? So, and I firmly believe that the difference between someone who is successful and someone who is not are the decisions they make and the people they have around them. And so I think, what you talk about in relationship to mentorship is very important. But what were some of the important decisions that you made, some of those things that really moved you forward? So that's question one. And the second one is, when you talk about mentorship, what does that look like? I think it's a word we use and we throw around a lot, but we need more mentors. I agree with that. What does that look like?
Absolutely. The decision-making process that I made is I've always been hungry. I grew up in a vulnerable population, and every decision I make, I try to make a decision with integrity and upholding my value system, first of all. But you can't make a decision unless you stand on a rock, and that's my faith in Jesus Christ. I'm a Catholic. I'm also in the Knights of Columbus. I was an altar boy as a kid. Again, my dad was tough on me, but he taught me religion and, the importance of that. And so, even though I went through that tragedy, I always turned to God for my strength and my conviction and being able to rise above. Because it is a scary world out there. I mean, people have to walk outside the front door and you do have to make these decisions, and success it's a thin line, from suicide for a veteran and, walking into $100,000 job that they've been working for 15 years and serving our country. I mean, it's a really fine line. And if you have to have the mindset, and luckily for me, when I went through the abuse, I had counseling as a kid, that helped me. So, I wasn't dwelling. I never dwell on negative circumstances, so when I make a decision, I'm on a solid foundation and I'm not dwelling on anything negative. I'm thinking positive. I think of the book, The Secret. The Secret is a great book to me that just pushes the positivity when you think with a positive mindset. And behavioral health is such an important issue, not only in the veteran community, but America as a whole, in making decisions is that you have a good, state of mind, that you're able to make rational decisions. And I think, being able to make rational decisions with a clear foundation, with clear thoughts, and also coupled with having people, like, again, I call them angels, people have come into my life. And I feel like, my life does have a purpose, and it is to serve people, to make a difference, and to help people. But when it comes to mentorship, it's kind of like leadership. You look at leadership, and a lot of people are like, millions of books are written on leadership. When it comes to mentorship, you don't see as many books on mentorship as leadership, but mentorship is really the building block of leadership. You can't be a leader unless you're a mentor, because you have to help somebody. Everybody's at a different stage of their lives or their careers, of their transition. Everybody needs something different. Being a mentor, I think, is being multifaceted. And when somebody needs something, if you can't get them the answer, you're able to connect them with someone who does have the answer. And I think that's one of my biggest strengths. I'm a huge networker. Your network is your net worth. And a lot of people, that's a skill that our veteran community really needs. They need networking skills. They need that help. You see a lot of group tanks out here that are helping veterans. I graduated through Entrepreneur Bootcamp for Veterans program, EBV program, through Florida State University, and certified entrepreneurship through their business school. There's a lot of programs out here that are helping you and giving you infrastructure and people around you. And I think, being able to take information in, but once you receive that information, if you just keep it for yourself, that's very selfish. But if you turn around and you give it to other people, whether it's through a book or it's through a podcast, or, it's connecting with someone locally, and you're giving back, that's where the value is as a human being, I believe, and really helping to, get you down that road. And especially when you're on a dark path, a lot of people, everybody is faced with adversity, and how you deal with that adversity. If you served in the military, we have the fundamental building blocks to help us make those decisions, fight or flight. I want to be surrounded with people when the bullets fly, that they're ready to pull that trigger back, and they're going to be able to make good decisions. But if they run away, or, someone's scared, or, they have a breakdown, which happens. It's normal. It's war. You're going to have, complications. And, I respect somebody regardless, but at the end of the day, we still have to, look out for each other. And I want to make sure that the people that are next to me, that's another thing, surrounding yourself with like-minded people. For example, if you have a drug addiction and you're hanging around people who are doing drugs, you're going to do more drugs. But if you have a drug addiction and you surround yourself with people that don't do drugs, or want to help get you on the right path, you're less likely to fall back into those patterns.
When you talk about mentorship, I look at it, or I view it as accountability. And the best kind of accountability is voluntary accountability, right? It's not having someone chase you down when you don't want to be chased down, or try to talk you into doing something you don't want to do. It's subjecting yourself or submitting yourself to accountability, so that you've invited people into your life that can speak the truth in your life. And that's, I think essential. I was going to say important, but I think it's essential for someone to grow and move forward. Mentorship would be the same or similar. So, two more questions. I'm on the 2-question kick right now, I guess. I don't know. Here's the first question. Is mentorship, as you define it or you describe it, do you think that's something that's structured? That's a program we need to have? There's a place where people can go to find those mentors? You mentioned a couple of places. Is it structured that way, or is it more family, friends, etc.? So that's the first question. The second one is, what do you do with someone who needs a mentor but doesn't want one? Because again, I think people transitioning out of the military often are pretty lost, and they don't want help. They don't want to be told what to do, but they need that help. What do you do with them? So, what does a mentorship program look like? If it's a program, where do people find them? And then what do you do with people who don't want one?
Well, the first part of it, mentorship and having the accessibility is really important. How do you go to get this information? What's the process that you're using? When I wrote the self-help books, it really is a step-by-step process to help people to transition. And the reason why I did that is it's like anything in life. My concentration of my master's from Penn State is in planning, training, and development. And I kind of will equate that to a mentorship process. If you want mentors, you have to first identify, I need a mentor. So that's in the planning stage. So somebody needs to identify, okay,
right.
what do I need? what is my strategy of where I'm going to go? What is my overall goal? So you look at your overall goal. I look at it like a mind map. I mean, honestly, people, don't talk. This is business here. So this is a very high level thing. Not everybody is subjected to this type of material, but a mind map is really important because a mind map gives you where you're going to. And then you set the goals around the strategies on how you're going to get there. So in the planning phase, you identify what you need. Then you train yourself. You get the, whether it's education or you're going to resources, but you're finding the information to help you on your path. Whether that's a mentor or you're going back to college or, you're going to a vocational or you're getting a certification, whatever is specific for you, you're going to be, you're going to find an apprentice because you want to be a plumber. You were a plumber in the military and you want to get your, or you want to be an electrician, you want to get your electrician card, whatever the case may be. And then from there, you execute. So you just don't go execute. You have to break down these steps to be able to do that. And I think a lot of times people just want the results. Right. And without the structure to get the results, I mean, the military provides structure. Now, just because you serve doesn't mean that you adopted that structure, which is critical. Right. For me, I grew up in a military house. So, that was a way of life. I was used to structure. But quite honestly, I never said this in my life. I was in basic training and, I don't have a lot of rhythm. I just never did at the beginning, and my facial hair grows in really thick, it grows by fast. So I could shave in the morning and then it will come back in the afternoon. So we were in drill on the square, on the yard. And, this drill sergeant was coming down on me really, really hard. And I almost broke down. Like, honestly, I never talked about this before, but I almost broke down because, it's your self-esteem. It's like you're under attack. Yeah. But that moment right there taught me who I was. It's like, some things are out of your control. The fog of war, you're in a situation, you can't control it. So what are the things that you can control? And I think when you set that path and you look at someone who's a mentor, there's somebody who's living that every day. I'm living a mentorship program every day, and I'm very open. The thing about me, and it's made my career very successful, anybody can contact me. I think I've gotten a lot of accolades from people in the community saying that you're accessible, that you're available. And I want to help as many people as I can, but I want to put you in touch with the resource so that you can, be able to make that decision for yourself. Because at the end of the day, you have to pick up the rifle, you have to pick up, the rucksack, you have to pick up the sandbag, and you have to make that decision. You and I, Chad, all these great people that are leaders, military leaders, are out here in the community running for Congress, trying to change the world. We got here because not only ourselves, but because of the people around us. I mean, we wouldn't be the people we are today if it wasn't for people around us, but we have to make that decision. And again, it comes back to having the willingness, and I'm not a selfish person, but you go through your journey and you learn things about yourself, you grow, you understand who you are, what you want to accomplish, what you want to become. And there's times when you have to fall back down. The journey has a lot of ups and downs. And I think that's important for military people who are transitioning. Hey, your lowest low isn't where you're going to stay, and your highest high is you can go further than that.
Yeah. What do you do with someone who doesn't want to, have that mind map? They don't want to figure out where they're going, whatever. You look at someone who's just broken, they need help. How do you, Michael, how do you motivate someone to say, look, here's where you can end up, go through that process with them and get them to buy into that? How do you shift the mind that way?
Well, I'm really into behavior modification. I applied for a PhD actually in 2016 at Virginia Commonwealth University in behavioral psychology. And the timing wasn't right. I didn't get into the program. I'm more of an application person, but that's my mindset. Really, the key I'm more on the emotional level, psychological, the feelings. So to answer that question, I approach it with love, honestly. I mean, to me, my Christian Judeo-Christian values, I'm Catholic, I'm in the Knights of Columbus, as I mentioned, but it's about love. You just love people. Like, I love people who serve this country. I'm so passionate for our military brave men and women and their families. We have to fight for them. We have to stand up for them. I'll take 1,000,000 bullets for my brothers and sisters because you know what? I wouldn't be who I am today without the military. I know the sacrifice, going to the gas chamber every 6 months, sucking down CS gas. This isn't the fun things that people talk about when you serve this country and the sacrifice that you're making just to ensure that your gas mask works. And if you have an NBC, a nuclear biological chemical attack, that you're going to survive. A lot of people don't understand these kind of things. So when you come back into the workplace, I'm a disabled vet. I had a couple traumatic brain injuries when I was in the military. I was actually in a Bradley that flipped over in Germany. And, I had a reasonable accommodation. When I was investigator for the feds, I had my lights over because I would get a lot of migraines. And, a lot of people are wondering, like, why does this guy have migraines? Why does he have his lights off? They don't understand some of the ramifications, and we need to have more compassion in the communities for our veterans. I mean, that's the thing that we're lacking here, because when you take off that uniform, nobody knows, who you are or what you've done. They may see some tattoos, some military tattoos, or, like me, I got a shaved head, but I've had a shaved head since high school. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I served in the military, but a lot, you have that kind of look, like you can kind of tell, people, but, I respect a lot of our veterans when I see them with their military hats. It's the little things, I think, for veterans. That's what they appreciate. When veterans are in a dark place, they need to know that somebody loves them.
Right.
One of the many things that you've done, you worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs. What did you do when you were with the VA? What was your job?
Well, actually, I got in through vocational rehab. That was the first time.
Okay.
I started working for the Postal Service. I worked for 4.5 years, and I really didn't enjoy it. I felt like, it wasn't for me. My life had something bigger. And so for a year, I was in between, like I was serving, I was waiting tables. Here I am, a highly decorated veteran, non-commissioned officer. I was waiting tables at Fridays and Outback, didn't really have a clear plan. I knew I wanted to make a difference. It's
Right.
like, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah,
you know what I
right,
mean?
right.
Talk about planning,
Define
training,
that,
and
right?
development.
Yeah.
But I met somebody, you have to be hungry for it. And that's when it comes. Honestly, you have to stay vigilant and ready for it. You can't just say, where's my life going? I was divorced, I was waiting tables. I had a high child support, which happens to a lot of military divorcees. And I met somebody, and they worked in vocational rehab for the Department of Veterans Affairs in Pittsburgh. That's where I was living. That's my home of records, where I grew up. And again, an angel. And so I went through voc rehab, and I ended up, working like a stipend, just a couple hours in the physical therapy department at the VA in Pittsburgh. So I did that for 2 months. And then while doing that, I met the people in HR, and they got me as a GS5 into an HR assistant role. And it just, from there, I built my career. I mean, just so many different things happened off of that. But I was at the point where I was like, is this the rest of my life? I served my country, and, where am I going? Who am I? It was a very dark place, man. I'm telling you, it was not a fun place for me at all. And I'm always honest, man, with the viewers, the listeners. That's the best way that we can relate to each other, is being honest with each other.
I think the ability to connect with our story is probably the key to healing in a lot of areas. It's, through our program, through what we do, we define ourselves or describe ourselves as a peer-to-peer program, meaning I'll tell my story, I'll tell you how I move forward, and you can, hopefully connect to that story, and we can move forward together. So, the story is so important in that. So you end up at the VA, you've transitioned out of the VA now, and you're doing a lot of other things. You maybe have even a higher view of, kind of the country and what's going on in the world than you did then. The VA has a pretty terrible reputation. I mean, if we're being honest, in our country right now. I think with civilians, it has a bad reputation. Certainly in the military community, it has a bad reputation. I do not ascribe to all the negativity. I think that the VA is a huge organization that was not designed to do what we've asked it to do. A lot of folks, are unhappy with it, and a lot of folks are very happy with it. From your perspective, having served there, working for the VA, and now separated from it and working with veterans and the conversations that you have and those kind of things, what's your perspective on the VA and kind of the future of that, and how we serve those who have served through that organization?
Well, one of my platform items running for U.S. Congress in Florida District 21 was VA reform. I believe that military and their families, when they get out, they have a service-connected disability, they should be able to go to their primary care doctor. They shouldn't have to go through the wait times that they go through. They shouldn't have to, go to 5 different places to get, to get the answer. It's really ridiculous, honestly. I mean, I'm somebody that's like veteran first, and, like our president, Donald J. Trump, America first, veteran first. I mean, honestly, and their families, it's not just them, because there's ramifications for their families. Like right now, my kids, I can't get them health care, even though I'm a 90% disabled vet. My kids should have health insurance. Why do I have to pay more money after I serve this country and my children are 15 and 13? They should be able to have health care. So there's a lot of things that we can do better outside of like polytrauma, behavioral health, things that are very specific with very specific doctors who aren't rotating in and out. So whenever somebody is having an issue, behavioral health is a big thing. People are dealing with, injuries, outside on the, their physical body, but then also inside scars that they're dealing with. And that doesn't mean that they're a broken person. Just because somebody has an issue that they're dealing with psychologically or emotionally doesn't mean that they're a bad person or that they want to harm people.
Sure.
It's like America is so quick to label people. If you serve this country, you're a hero. So let's find solutions to help them when they do have a behavioral health issue, to help them rehabilitate them. Like I said, I had counseling as a kid. If I didn't have that counseling, I guarantee you the level of abuse, because I had one of the worst cases in America of abuse that happened to me. And, I was able to recover because of it. So how many times has a veteran committed suicide and they didn't get the care that they needed? Basic care that they needed, which could have greatly influenced their life. Sometimes people just need hope, just a little bit of hope. And if they get that hope, then they can move forward. And the VA is not the solution. A lot of people, they love it. I've talked to people and they think, well, what are you talking about? Yeah. And then, I look at a case like in West Palm Beach down here. I've been helping a woman whose husband, she Baker acted him. And he was in there, supposed to be in care, and it committed suicide while in the care of the VA. And she's supposed, they're supposed to be getting the help. And then the VA is covering up. I mean, I understand that there's a political part of it. You have a lot of people committing suicide, setting themselves on fire outside the VA. Why do you think they're doing that? There's a reason why. If someone's pushed psychologically to that level to literally set themselves on fire or have a firearm in their car and commit suicide, my heart just breaks, because where is the failure there? There has to be a level of accountability, and that's what's missing at the VA, that level of accountability. And another huge thing that I found when I deal with these people is the lack of empathy. And this is my biggest problem with the VA, is there's no empathy. And people in Congress right now, the majority of people in Congress, we have less people who served. So they don't know the experiences when we serve. They don't know, going on the night ruck marches. They don't know, what it's like to, not get a shower for 30 days or, not eat MREs for 30 days. 60 days. They don't know what it's like to really sacrifice. That's what's missing in Congress. That's why I was running for Congress. And I had a lot of people against me. I had a lot of corruption against me because I am a straight shooter. I do have a really, great background, and I care about the community, and that's what it's about. And we've gotten away from that. But, to bring someone to that point where they feel like their life isn't valuable and not having empathy is really the biggest things. And, when I talk to people at the VA, I'm like, the way they talk to veterans, it's like, what kind of day, just because, it's like anybody in a workplace, you come to your job, you might not have the best situation, you might be going through a divorce, one of your kids might be sick. Not everybody feels good. But when you go to the VA, the problems that people are going through on a daily basis are small compared to what the issues that a veteran's dealing with after what they sacrificed for America, from my perspective.
One of the conversations that we organizationally have around the Veterans Administration and really all government programs for veterans is this, that those programs are important and there is a demographic of those who have served that need the help that those offer. But that we have undercut our own ability to help people because those organizations, specifically the VA and others, can't even recommend non-VA or non-clinical programs for help. One of the initiatives that we're involved in right now, in fact, next week, Chad, our founder, and myself, and a couple others from our organization are presenting to a congressional committee about faith-based solutions and faith-based programs and really just non-government programs. Multiple thousands of organizations across the country that have organized as 501c3 nonprofits to help veterans, and yet veterans often don't even know they exist, don't have access to that care because the VA won't let them out of the system. When you look at the solution, and you did say the VA is not the solution, I agree with that. I think personal responsibility is also a big part of that. But sometimes the hope is gone when you go to the VA, they're your last hope and they're not meeting up to your expectations or helping the way they should. Is there a solution in there for non-government, non-VA programs? Other nonprofits, citizens who have organized to help those who have served?
Well, I think the problem is that it's gridlocked. To get into the VA is very difficult. I mean, in life, it's all who you know anyway. But these, take yoga, which I just interviewed Judy Weaver, who started Connected Warriors down here in Boca Raton, but it's a national program who is integrating yoga for our veterans, which I think is a great thing. Chiropractic care, which the VA didn't accept for a long period of time, which now they do have it at the VA. When you look at these programs and trying to get them institutionalized into the VA, that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where the red tape comes in. That's where the political storm starts, and so that's hard when you have these organizations that want to come in, they want to make a difference, they want to help our veterans, they're passionate about our veterans, and they have programs, they have some funding, they want to make a difference. It's hard actually to get inside the VA, and that's one of the things that people have been very frustrated with, is that, hey, is the VA here to help or not? Community partners are a big thing, and I think the VA tries. I'm not just going to trash the VA. I mean,
Of course.
but it's also a moneymaker for the community. You take the VA's hospitals, it's just like a military base. You take the military bases away from community, what's going to happen to that economy?
Right.
What's going to happen to that community? It's going to go down drastically. Like, it's going to become, a vulnerable population in that area. So, that's why these things are holding on so tight, because they know that it's a huge, financial machine for the area that the location is.
Yeah, and the gridlock that comes from really from the top down. What causes that? Why are those who are in charge so hesitant to refer out and to allow other organizations to step in and help?
Well, again, it's the piece of the pie. If you have somebody else, it's budget. It's simple fiscal responsibility for the agency, and the VA as a whole. If you have someone that can come in and do it better at a cheaper price with lower, better outcomes and lower, negative outcomes too. Better positive outcomes but lower negative outcomes.
Sure.
That's gonna, that's kind of like, oh, we don't need the VA.
Yeah.
So that's really what it's about. It's like, okay, if somebody can come in here and do it better, then what are we doing here? Which it is. I mean, this is America. I mean, we're a free enterprise. I mean, that's what, having capitalism and not being a socialist country is all about, which I support our Constitution and being able to have, freedoms to be able to create free enterprise and to be help competition. I mean, competition is good. But a lot of times, when you get this, so big, it's like too big to fail in a way.
Right. Man, there's so many issues. Do you think you will run for Congress again?
Well, right now I put out there that, I'm going to run for president in 2024. That's why I started the podcast and the radio that I did, because, I'm trying to continue to build my brand and my name to help people. A lot of people recognize what I stand for and who I am, but that goes against the establishment. There is, coercion in the communities to keep the drugs in the communities, to keep veterans, off balance, to keep, fraud, waste, and abuse, and, from pharmaceutical companies and other, drug rehabilitation centers. I mean, every day, mostly I live in Delray Beach, Florida, which is one of the capitals of the world for, drug rehab. And, every day someone's at these drug rehabs, they're supposed to be getting rehabilitated. Their families and parents are, military sent them down here, and someone's dying of an overdose and nobody talks about it. It just goes unreported. And these are the kind of things that I stand for, my principles, my values. So I want to help continue on the path that God has before me, and that's really what it's about. Is like, taking the gifts that I've been given to help other people.
So you look at any political office, but particularly president, of course. What would be the major issues that you would say, I need to be the guy because I will deal with these 5 issues, these 4 issues, whatever they are?
Well, if you look at what the president's done, he's done a lot of great things. Immigration, foreign policy, loop those together. Those are obviously very, very important. Our relationships with foreign countries, not being the world police, but being more diplomatic, offering solutions, and also not letting people take advantage of us. I mean, that's a key component of any, strategy. Obviously fiscal responsibility is something that's very, very important to our nation. We can't keep kicking the can down the road. That has happened. We have to have accountability with our legislators in Congress. We need term limits. I mean, that's one of the things that, that I support, because, when someone gets into office, you have 30-year politicians up there in Washington,
Right.
and nothing's getting done. Everybody says they support our veterans. It's like the yellow ribbon. You see people riding around with yellow ribbons on their car after 9/11 and everything. Yeah. And, then a veteran walks across the street and you want to run him over, you know what I mean? So it's like, what's really going on? I mean, that's important. Healthcare, we just talked about VA reform, but healthcare as a whole is something that needs addressed. Obamacare, is something that, hasn't worked out that way that it was intended to. We have to fix that. We also have to fix our social services for our retirees. Social Security needs, to look at, people's individual retirement accounts. Less people are saving money. We need to have, promote small businesses, we need to help create better quality of life. I'm in support of that, obviously. And also, you see in this country, our education, we need education reform. You see, we have a big barriers right now with, the middle class. The middle class is shrinking. We right now unemployment's at a low, but we don't have a lot of high capacity jobs that people are sought after. There's a lot of technical jobs, and we need more jobs that pay a great wage where people can go in and provide for their families. Right now we have the rich and we have the poor, basically. The middle class is shrinking. The way you do that is with education, providing opportunities to the communities. And I would love to be a person that does that. I'm passionate about the communities. I've served on boards. I was vice chair of Mission United down in Broward County, which was started down here in Florida to help, organize a lot of these things. We need a central base where people can go and get the services that are results driven. And I think being a results driven leader with the experience and helping the communities is important, but it's just like anybody else in life. Like say somebody wants to be a plumber and they're like, well, I want to be a plumber. And they're like, well, you have to go to school, you have to learn your trade, you have to get there. And it doesn't happen right there. But then you get your certification and they're like, well, this has happened to a lot of veterans and a lot of Americans. You go out, you pay $1,000 to get your education, and then you show up and you want to get a job. And they're like, well, you've never done this before, go work in the mailroom.
Right.
And it's kind of like, really? I mean, people are investing in the system, but the system hasn't been giving back to them.
When you look at the landscape of our country, not just the political landscape, but just generally, I think there are a lot of reasons to be positive about the future. There are also a lot of reasons, and these are often being just forced on us, to feel negative or feel bad about it. It's hard, I think, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, to discern. Is it as bad as we're being told it is, or is that just, kind of an agenda that's being pushed at us? Is there a reason to be hopeful? I think a lot of people are very scared, and I don't know that there's a lot of justification necessarily for that, but it's, it's a very scary time. When you look at our country, the landscape of the country, that being the economy and our political landscape and the divide that goes along with that, and those who are coming along, are you positive? Are you encouraged to look down the road a little bit with the thought that it's going to be okay, things are getting better, we're moving in the right direction? And if so, why would you say that you are?
Well, right now, I think there's always a shift. Every 2 years, Congress changes. You have a lot of Senate seats that are up. The president changes every 4 years. Obviously, the Republican and Democrats, whoever's in office drives the engine, so to speak. And so I think right now with what the president's done, if you look at Barack Obama, former president, he was putting our billions of dollars on American airplanes, military planes, and sending them over to Iran. Obviously that's not a good look for us. I mean, that doesn't send a good message to me, having served this country. Right. A president who's putting money and giving it to a terrorist nation. I mean, I 100%, do not agree with that. But on the flip side, you look at the president now, President Donald J. Trump, who's in office, putting America first. North Korea, he met with the president, the dictator there in North Korea. The trade deal with China, making sure that we have fair trade. The NAFTA deal that he reworked with Canada and Mexico. Keeping American businesses here, giving them, a reason to want to keep their business here in America versus offshoring it or outsourcing, some of their supply chain management or, their distribution channels. And so it's important that we think about that. So the president, I think right now has done a great job. So looking towards the future, going into this election year, 2020, it is going to be very decisive. I mean, it's going to make a difference on where policies and where the nation, it's just like kind of like a ship in the ocean with the Navy. You got these big destroyers, and it takes a lot to shift them in the middle of the ocean. And that's what happens when you have new president, and then if you have the House and the Senate divided, then obviously, you look at what's happening right now with this impeachment talk. I mean, it's not good for the economy. It's not good for the American people. They want people to go into Congress and get the job done. They want a president who's going to deliver, promises made, promises kept. And I think our president has done that. But it's critical moving forward that we continue down that juncture. And then also we have to eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. I mean, honestly, that's, you look back a few months ago, about 6 months ago, we had a back brace Medicaid fraud of like $4 billion. And, these are people that are driving up costs for our country, which are making it harder for retirees to retire and have less money available to them. And, we just keep doing these things that are kicking the can down the road. So I think we're on the right path economically, but we have to, be more fiscally responsible, and we have to ask ourselves the tough questions, and we have to be able to face them, when it comes to healthcare, education reform, things of that nature, not just wiping people's student debt off and, giving people free education or having open borders. I don't think that's the answer. We have to come up with a viable solution that helps America continue to be that strong nation that we are, and preserve our Constitution for the freedom, liberty, and justice that, we fought for.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Michael, thank you for your time. Where can, and you've mentioned it, but where can our listeners and viewers find you, your podcast, the radio show, and your other social media?
Oh, for awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on, and appreciate what you and Chad are doing for sure. People can they can get my books. First book I wrote on the beauty is called Turning the Page, Overcoming Abuse to Reach Life's Fulfillment. The military book I wrote that I mentioned, also Our Journey, Heart to Heart with God. You can get that on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. I mean, it's all over the internet. You can pretty much go to those major book sites, Kindle, all that, to get the books there. Yep. As far as my social media handles on Twitter and Instagram, I'm the 4 USA Freedom. You can also connect with me, Michael Bluemling Jr., on all major social media platforms, Parler, all those kind of things, Facebook. And then also the podcast is Live with Michael Bluemling Jr. It's on every major site, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube. I mean, it's everywhere that you can, at Radio Play. It's pretty much everywhere. And it will be on, there's one other site that you have to have your podcast going for 2 months. That'll be on to iHeartRadio. It'll be there too. And then also the radio show I just started was on Blog Talk Radio, and it's the Michael and Chauncey Show. So just spread the message and help. I mean, that's really what it takes. I mean, community building is community leaders and sharing the information. And so I appreciate it. And I'm very grateful. I'm very humble. And it's such an honor to serve our military community. I love our brothers and sisters, and God bless them. And God bless them, the people who are serving right now, because without them, we wouldn't be a free nation.
Yeah, that's right. Michael Bluemling Jr., thank you so much. Appreciate your time, and we'll get you back on as we get closer to the 2024 election. So, I mean, if we make it to the 2020 election, then we'll start looking beyond that. But, man, it's awesome to have you on. Thank you for your time. For those of you that are watching, if you have not yet subscribed, please do that. Hit the notification bell. That will let you know when more content comes online. For those of you that are listening everywhere else, jump over to YouTube and check us out there. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.